Can you believe we started Interview Boss in 2021?
Not really. It's insane. That's a lot of episodes and a lot of hours of talking.
Oh my gosh, it is. And if you're scrolling through all of our episodes, you might scroll straight past something that you really, really needed.
Yes, we're always getting messages from people asking us to do an episode on something, and I'm like, we already have.
So we've put together playlists to help you find the episodes that are exactly what you need, suited to your situation.
They're all categorized. If you're applying for jobs, we have episodes about resumes, cover letters, job ads. If you've been offered your dream job, we have episodes on resigning, exit interviews, and how to impress at your new company.
And we even have a very special playlist that's very popular for if you have an interview coming up immediately and you need just our most recommended hard-hitting episodes between now and then.
For all our last-minute listeners. It's all there for you. You can browse by category and check out all the playlists at interviewboss.com.au/podcast.
You're not going to go down in salary. They're not going to be like, oh, actually, now that you think about it, you are paid too much.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Interview Boss. My name's Emma. I'm a third-year journalism student who's teamed up with my sister to give you advice, inspiration, and support when you're looking for a new job. Sarah is a HR and recruitment professional, and together we're excited to give you guys all the tips, tricks, and behind-the-scenes knowledge to help you in your career.
Hey Em, this week we're talking about a really important topic when it comes to jobs. It's the reason we even go to work in the first place. It's money. It's salary.
Money,
hourly
money.
rate. Exactly.
That's right. Specifically, we're going to be talking about getting a pay rise when you're in an existing role, negotiating your salary. So we have a nice little statistic to start us off here. Important to note, this was a US study, but worldwide data has sort of showed similarities between this. But 68% of men and 45% of women negotiated their salaries in 2018. And 70% of the 2,800 managers that were surveyed expect candidates to negotiate. Now, this is amazing for two reasons. Number one, points out that men generally are a little bit more likely to negotiate. And two, the interesting thing here is that 70% of the managers expect this. So I think a huge fear of people asking for a pay rise is like, what if they think I'm crazy? Like, why would you ask that? How dare you? Like, but that's really not the case. Generally, managers expect this, that at some point candidates are going to negotiate their salary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes for when you're coming into a new job, which we'll talk about in another episode, but also when you are in the same role. It's not uncommon for these conversations to come up, and it's not really a big surprise when someone says, hey, I want to review my salary. It's something that happens pretty regularly.
Absolutely. And you touched on it just before, but this is a huge topic. So we are going to make 2 episodes about this. Our other episode is going to be about salary expectations when you're starting a new role, how to, work out if you're going to leave your current job for a better salary, all of that. So that's your future jobs. This episode is going to focus on your current job and negotiating within your same company. So on that note, if you're in an existing role and you feel that you deserve a pay rise, how do you initiate that conversation? What should you take with you? Where do you even begin? Give me the lowdown.
So I think the first part that you really need to look at is what's the context of your company. There might be policies on salary. They might do an annual review. You might not be able to negotiate in the first 6 months or the first 12 months. There's all kinds of rules that I've seen in the past. And I think it's important that you figure that out, because you might have an annual salary review and you need to get your timing right, because if you ask, in the end of the year, and actually salary review happens at the beginning of the year,
you might have to
they're going to make you wait.
Year.
And if you miss it, yeah, exactly. So you want to know when that happens.
That.
So yeah, exactly. So I think look at your policies, look at, speak to your team about it, your manager even. You can ask them about kind of what the policies are. You could ask HR, but I think I'd do my digging, in some other ways if you can. And I think that's really important for when you're going into these kind of situations, because it shows that you've given some awareness to the way that they do things. And I've seen people be a little bit unaware and just say, oh, look, I'd like my salary negotiated, and it's the complete wrong time of year, and you're going, okay, well, we're doing that in 3 months anyway. That's going to be the most appropriate time for us to have that conversation, and you've got a much better chance if you're working in with what they already do anyway, because the team aren't going to have to ask for an exception. They can just put you into the normal kind of process that they go through.
Definitely be across all of that first step. Second step, we have ask for a meeting with your boss and tell them what it's about. I find it interesting that you've put tell them what it's about, because I feel like a lot of nervous people would be inclined to just be like, can I please speak to you, and not say anything because they're dying inside, and then bung it on them in there. But we do want to let them know, can I speak to you about my pay or about salary or...
Yeah, about progression in my role, about progression in my career. Do you think I could speak to you about my career? You can make it a little bit more general. And I definitely would recommend that you do, because there's a lot more than you can get out of these conversations than just money. Obviously, that's going to be your key goal going in for a salary negotiation, but there might be other things that you might be able to get out of it, other benefits, other training that you might be interested in that isn't necessarily money. So I would frame it up as a bigger conversation. But yeah, you don't want to surprise your boss. You don't want them walking in going...
It might work in your favour. Like if they're aware, they may be like, oh, right, start thinking about the things you've done. Just be in that mindset, ready to expect that, compared to just being like, oh, I'm so caught off guard. Let's revisit this. We love that.
Yep, exactly.
Next up,
book in a meeting.
Great. So we've worked out the context. We've booked in a meeting. It's time to do some research. Tell me about this. What does doing research involve?
Yeah, and I guess you could probably swap these around the other way, right? You might want to do your research before you book the meeting. But either way, these are definitely things to do. So you should have a look at Indeed, on Seek, on LinkedIn. There's also a lot of recruitment companies like Hayes and a few others that do like a salary survey that you can use. Do some Googling to look up salaries in your area, in your field, and you're at your level. So Seek, you're more looking at jobs that have got the salary listed in the bracket that you're looking at, whereas the others can kind of give you a bit of a salary report and let you know where you sit in the average. It can also be quite tricky because that range of salaries is normally massive. So that can span $50,000 between the lowest and the highest. Exactly, yeah. But it can give you a really good indicator of, okay, are you already above or below average? Can you look at different job titles and how that would impact your salary as well? And if you've been in a position where, you've been performing a job above kind of what your previous job title was, maybe you can go in and make the case that, you're given a different job title. And then you can research a new job title and say, look, I think, I'd come into that job title at the lower end of that higher level job, and that would be around this much money. So research can really, really help you in this whole process, back up what you're talking about.
Right, and next we have prepare a one-pager on the value that you've added over the past year. You want projects that you've worked on, things you've taken on, results you've achieved, your salary research. This is a bit like our guess what, prove it, so what, but to our own employer. Guess what? Since I've been here, I led this team and I did this all on my own. Nobody asked me to do this. I've actually taken on way more responsibilities than my initial contract, and this has resulted in XYZ for your company.
Exactly. That is exactly right. Yep. You need the results there if you can. The salary research that you've obviously gone through, and also the, anything that you've achieved. You've trained some people, you've gone above and beyond. I think it's important in these situations to think about if you're meeting the expectations of your job, just meeting your employer's expectations, they're going to see it like, okay, well, we're paying you what we're paying you and you're meeting the expectations. We're all good here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You kind of want to show, I'm doing more, therefore I'm going to expect more in terms of salary, and that's why I'm here to ask for it. So I think leading up to these conversations, you should be thinking about what are the things that I can do above and beyond the basics of my role in order for me to go in and then be able to ask for a salary increase. I think if you're just ticking the things off that you have to do each day, you don't have as strong of a case to say why your salary should be increased.
And another important thing to note here is prepare not to get an immediate answer. It probably gives you a lot of anxiety being like, oh my God, it's been 2 weeks that they haven't heard. They obviously don't want to give me a pay rise. But there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes. There's probably 700 managers it has to go through. They have to go to their manager, HR, like it's a whole thing. So if they're taking their time, it doesn't mean they don't think you're worthy. They're just taking their time.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think, you know, the action step from that is to follow up after about a week. I'd leave it at least a full week, if not a little more, depending on your circumstances, and just ask what the process is, what are likely to be the next steps, when might you find out. I'd frame it more like that rather than saying what's the answer.
So now some more generalized tips. We've got the sort of steps there, the process you're going to take, but there's probably a lot of people thinking, okay, but what do I actually say when I'm in there? How do you ask for what specifically you want? Our general tip is give one number, not a range, and make it your happy dance number. I love that. Slightly higher than what you'd be happy to accept because they're never going to offer you above what you've asked for. So in this case, better to shoot high and them meet you in the middle somewhere, classic negotiation, than to give them the bare minimum of what you need to stay and them offer you less. That's counterproductive.
Yeah, exactly. And now I want to say here, this doesn't really work like when you're negotiating to buy a car. You know how you offer like a ridiculously low price and then they offer like a tiny little discount and then you kind of
like bartering with people in overseas markets where you walk away and you're like, nope, and then they're like, okay, come back. It's not like that.
It's not quite like that. So as much as I've very, very, very rarely seen a circumstance where anyone has been offered more than what they said they wanted. It's extremely rare. If you've said that's what you wanted, that's what they're going to try and get you as a maximum. So you want to make sure that that number is something you're actually going to be really excited about. But it shouldn't be ridiculous because I think that's when you get into a situation where your manager's going to be like, well, you're not really being reasonable because that's a $20,000 pay rise, right? So you want to make sure that that number still makes sense.
If there's a lot of people out there that maybe have never like asked for a pay rise, it's their first, so they're new to it, like, is there a percentage that you would say in one go is too much? Like, generally speaking, could you not ask for 40% more of a pay rise? Is your first pay rise generally going to be like 10%, 20%, or is there no such kind of limit? Like, let's give people a boundary if they have no idea.
Good point. The idea that you would get like a 20, 30, 40% pay rise in your current job, the chances are very slim.
Right. That's good.
This is not going to be what people really want to hear, but it's the truth in every company that I've worked for.
I mean, it's good that I know nothing about this because it's good to just keep it simple for people who might have no idea. Like, if I was to ask for a pay rise, how are you supposed to know what the parameters are? Like we've just told everyone you have to pick a number, not a range. And if you're a bit clueless, how do you know like the parameters?
Yeah. So some companies will have a policy where it says you can't get any more than, say, a 10% pay increase on what you were already being paid, unless there are extenuating circumstances. Some don't have policies like that, but you will always struggle to get more than, 15%, 20%. Like those numbers, an employer is always going to have this conversation, and I've heard so many of these. Oh, we just, we want to save some for if we want to give them an increase later on or next year and make them keep performing. They don't want to give you all the money up front. They want to keep something for next year. They want to keep
like
something
capitalist
for
bullshit.
It's kind of ridiculous, but this is my piece of advice for everyone listening out there. If your focus is to get a massive pay increase, you are more likely to be able to do that going to a different job.
Right. And we'll talk about that all in our other episode, but...
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
To keep it simple.
And so that's why, for giving a little intro to our next episode, it's really important to make sure you're going in on a salary you're really happy with, because you're going to be stuck, anchored to that number, and it's going to take you a while to get back up to, what you really wanted.
Touching on that, because we haven't covered that actually, how long before you're in a current role, we haven't prefaced how long this hypothetical person's been in the current role. Do you, apart from their policies that they might have, if you've just generally been there and you think you're doing a good job, is there no time limit? You can ask for one whenever. Would you generally say like 6 months?
Has to be at least 6 months. Anything less than that, you're just being a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
You've signed a contract with a number on it and you've agreed to that salary.
Yeah.
Anything sooner than that seems like, well, you know, this was the offer. If you weren't going to stay for that much money, then you shouldn't have accepted the job. I would say probably more than 12 months, to be honest, but circumstances could change that.
It's a flexible number.
For example, if something significantly changes and, you know, you're now adding on responsibility or doing more stuff, or someone in your team's left or something like that, that can be a good trigger for you to make that case inside the 12 months. Normally, though, I'd say more than 12 months.
Awesome. And another little general tip here we have, don't give personal reasons like, oh, my rent's gone up or my kids. Not relevant. They don't want to know. It could be tempting because you're trying to convince them why you need more money, but keep it about the market, the value you add, your worthiness, like, you know, the things you've done. Keep it professional. They don't need to know.
And I think people do that because they're trying to justify why they need the increase, and it kind of makes it easier to have that conversation. Like, oh, you know, cost of living.
You wanting it is enough justification, and you believing you deserve it. So whatever. Yeah.
And the business at the end of the day is a business, and they can't pay people more just because their kids are going to a school and doing activities that need more money on the weekends, or they've got aging parents. And absolutely you work for, you know, a manager who's a human, and they probably know some of that stuff anyway, but that's not going to be how they're going to get it across the line with the finance team, with the COO, with whoever it is that has to sign this off, with the HR team, the payroll team. They need business reasons as to why this increase needs to happen. So focus on those only.
Also, a random thought just occurred, but I saw this quote the other day because I think a lot of people get such anxiety around this topic and think like, oh, what if they just think I'm ridiculous, or they feel guilty, or how could I ever do that? It was something along the lines of like, you're an employee who signed a contractual obligation, like you're entitled to leave, it's just you're upholding a contract, and in that contract you're entitled to be reviewed and ask for pay. Like, it's just a thing you're upholding.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think what I would remind people is the worst that can happen is that you don't get anything, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to go down in salary. They're not going to be like, oh, actually, now that you think about it, you are paid too much.
On that note, if you do get declined and you're really disheartened, you really wanted it, you really felt like you were worthy, what's the next step? Do you go again in 6 months? Do you ask for them to reconsider? Do you appeal? What do you do?
I think that's where you kind of do a pros and cons of like, what are you getting out of that job? This is something that I've done for myself a lot of times over my career so far. Looking at the job that you're in and going, okay, other than pay, what am I getting out of this job? And if you're getting experience that you're going to be able to convert into pay later down the track with another company, or maybe later if you get, you know, promoted and stuff, then maybe that's worth it for you. But you also might be at a point in your career where the money's actually more important than the experience. You've got the experience already, and that's when you might need to start doing a bit of a pros and cons, and thinking about, you know, looking at other opportunities out there. You know, you can also apply for stuff and get a job offer, and you don't have to take that job offer. You don't have to accept it. But you can go through a process and work out whether another company might actually be a better fit.
That wraps up this episode on how to negotiate salary in your existing role. I'm going to do another episode next week that's going to be all about when you're applying for a new job and how to negotiate that salary, set the expectations, weigh up whether to take the job or not based on salary, all of that. But for today, I hope that helped. We've really covered the steps, what you need to do to get your ducks in a row, how to bring it up, how to get the number, what research to do. We hope you feel a little bit less nervous and feel empowered to ask for that pay rise, because you deserve it. You deserve it.
Absolutely. And if you get one, let us know. I would love to hear of someone that got a pay rise after listening to our advice. So good luck.
Got to shoot your shot. We'll be back in your ears next week.
Thanks so much for listening to Interview Boss. If you want to hear more from us, make sure you hit subscribe. We're a new podcast, so if you liked this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a review so we can help even more people. For more advice, inspiration, and a supportive community, join us in the Interview Boss Facebook group.
We've been your job search besties and helped you in some way. There's a cool way you can support the show. Shout us a virtual coffee.
We get a huge kick out of reading all of your success stories. Head to buymeacoffee.com/interviewboss and shout us a cuppa.
If you keep us caffeinated, we can keep the content coming.